And now, an 8th special presentation.
This time on Art Beat Nation. A serpentine structure snakes its way through town.
I think public art is incredibly important because it reflects whatever's going on in society.
We meet a photographer with a sharp eye and a taste for wonder.
Don't go out with preconceived ideas. Go out to discover them.
Get up close to evocative paintings steeped in history.
Beckmann, for me, is the greatest German painter of the 20th century.
And The Jungle Book gets reimagined for the stage.
You know, it really is leaving the jungle that all of us have to go through.
It's all ahead on this edition of Art Beat Nation. Funding for Art Beat Nation is made possible by contributions to 8 from viewers like you. Thank you. First, we stopped by Houston, Texas, where an entire neighborhood pitched in to help an artist realize his creative vision. And it was certainly a tall order, 180 feet to be precise. Take a look.
This is Montrose Boulevard, which of course is a main arts corridor from Allen Parkway on up to the CAM, the MFA. So this is a really ideal central location that we're at, where the Art League Houston is sited. There's a fair amount of traffic that comes by each day, so it's great to have something so visible, you know, on a thoroughfare. That is Funnel Tunnel. It was created from a steel armature woven with recycled painted wood. It's 180 feet long, and it's fairly consistently 5 feet in diameter all the way through. The tail end, which tapers to a point, and then on the other end it flows out into a 12-foot diameter bell or horn. So there are 4 trees on the median laid out in kind of a zigzag pattern. And I wanted to make sure that this was in concert with that. You know, maybe it had a conversation that happened with those trees and also with the traffic and with the neighborhood in general, and kind of spoke to the energy of the neighborhood. It's just made out of 2 varieties of steel stock, which is a 3/8 inch round rod and 1/4 inch round rod. So it's a very light framework that we've created. And what that looked like was building these sort of noodles, 5-foot diameter tubes, basically with a very gentle bend, and we made about 14 or 16 of those to the points where it changes shape at the end. So one end is tapered into kind of a hook, like a scorpion's tail, and the other end, it bells out into a cone or sort of a trumpet. And so the idea there is that each end is unique and serves a different function. The hooked end was intended to point here to the Art League. For me, the interest in the bell or the cone end was to sort of serve as like an announcement, but also maybe to draw in people's attention. So just a fun way to play with form. After the framework was complete, it became possible to start weaving the material in. So the material that you're looking at on the surface is all from a turn of the century, I guess like 1900s cotton gin, which, you know, I didn't realize anything like that was still around. And so I got all these beautiful, huge, old-growth pine planks that I started ripping them into very thin 1/4 inch strips that were then flexible and able to be woven into the surface. So after I created this bulk of ripped material, I brought it over to the Art League here. Actually used the Texas Art Supply parking lot, which is right next door, and sponsored a painting party where people from the community could come and they could really put their creative mark on it. So it was of huge interest to me that you know, we'd be able to literally have the community show up in the project. It feels great to really draw on the energy of others and to get input too. So like the form was predetermined, but the surface was by no means known to me what that would look like. The color is based on a large number of paints that were left over from people. I was asking for people to give me, like odds and ends that they had laying around in their garage or whatever. And we also had a really nice donation from the Valspar paint company. I guess it's uniformly chaotic on the surface, so it somehow works. There's been a lot of wonderful conversations and great reactions that people have given, about the project. And so some people have said, is it supposed to be like a bird's head on the end where it tapers, or is it a snake, is it a dragon, what is it, And for me, it's like, well, I'm interested in what it looks like to you, I just made the form. It was sort of an intuitive form, and beyond that, whatever is associated with it, great. I think public art is incredibly important because it reflects whatever's going on in society. It can either be something just a pure pleasure, or maybe it can catalyze conversation around different issues. And I think that's really fascinating. And my favorite thing is when people from the neighborhood say, we love this, because after all, they're the ones that have to see it most often. So I'm happy to know that they like what's there.
For more, visit artleaguehouston.org. Next, we sit down with Joanne O'Hare, a fine arts photographer who explores the Wisconsin landscape in search of her next subject. Though she has years of experience behind her, O'Hare seeks to learn new things in a field that still excites her.
I particularly like to work with pattern and texture and diagonal lines, all of the design principles, I guess, that I came through with my background in art. My name is Joanne O'Hare, and I'm a fine arts photographer. My interest in photography came from working with a lot of outdoor experiences and little by little moving into nature photography, and then deciding that the ordinary was exciting and wonderful, but that there was so much more to it. And my work moved into abstracts and into various levels of interest. My images were in nature, because I like the outdoor light, and I have a tendency to be pretty simple in my packaging, because I start out with just basically a tripod, a digital SLR, and my work would be to go into the field and then start looking for the picture within the picture. Find a subject matter that you really like. And the subject matter that I've been really excited about has been working with a patch of poppies that are in my backyard. My grandfather had a house and a garden, and he sat in the garden on a regular basis. And these were some of the flowers that were growing there. I started photographing on a yearly basis. The flower is so delicate. Then you wait for the lovely golden light that comes later in the afternoon as the sun goes down, and it has a tendency to give a glow, a golden glow to whatever is happening. The flowers can range from an orange to a real bright red, and it's a common poppy that's found throughout gardens all over the United States. Two flowers that are one behind the other, which is kind of soft and will be finishing. The other one is in full bloom, and you get the contrast between the greens in the background, and you get the blue center of the flower, and then you get the soft petals. I have a tendency to embrace the flowers that are common to the Wisconsin landscape. Recently, I've been doing a series on irises and like that a lot. The other flowers that I've photographed in the past have been some of the magnolias. It's an aesthetic, it's something that warms your heart, it's something that you find out that you have to walk and look and be surprised. And so you stand in the rain and you take the photographs. Find something that you like to photograph and then start with it. You get a wide angle shot, you get your established shot. Then step into the image and find something inside that image. So you're basically exploring your subject. So nature photography is an absolutely wonderful way to begin, and the subject is still, it doesn't move around on you, and you get some great lighting in the late afternoon. Shadows can be absolutely a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to discover, here again, the patterns. And that in itself sometimes can make the photograph. You move from subject to subject. There was a farm site with a huge array of old cars, just junked sitting around wherever they happen to be. You start moving from automobile to metal surface to bumper sides, and you end up finding abstract patterns, and that can be a real joy. The digital darkroom is one of the most exciting things that I think I've come across in a long time. And I'm beginning to embrace it and use it more enthusiastically than I had always done in the past. And most everybody should be carrying their camera with them at all times. And they are right now with the new iPhone photography and all the applications that you can put on it. I'm starting to work with a mini iPad. Photography has changed tremendously. It's so cool to be able to take a shot and send it instantaneously, so you're sharing your images. Don't go out with preconceived ideas, go out to discover them. You move from that photographer who is recording images to creating images. That's the fun part when you start creating your own images. Photography is art.
Check out JoanneO'Hare.com for more. Join us now in Missouri at the St. Louis Art Museum as we tour the Max Beckmann exhibition. Having amassed the largest collection of the German painter's work, the exhibit is unique for its range and size. But it's the rich colors and evocative subject matter that continue to captivate visitors more than a century after Beckmann's death.
It's the largest collection of paintings by Max Beckmann in the world. We have 39 paintings here. We have around 350 prints. Beckmann was a great printmaker. So, you know, this really, if anywhere in the world to see Max Beckmann, this is the place. The main reason for that is a collector called Morton May, who is the largest private collector of Beckmann's work. When Beckmann came to St. Louis in the late 1940s, he met Morton May. He painted Morton May's portrait, and he bequeathed his collection to the St. Louis Art Museum in 1983. First major retrospective of Beckmann's work in America. It took place here in 1948. Beckmann, for me, is the greatest German painter of the 20th century. He's an artist who, throughout his career, was always searching for new modes of painting, of printmaking, of sculpture. He experimented in all of those areas. And the Sinking of the Titanic here is really one of his most ambitious paintings, certainly in terms of scale. This is a work which measures 8.5 feet high by 11 feet wide. What you can see here is essentially the struggle for survival of these figures who are in the various lifeboats. The Titanic you can see in the distance against this kind of iron red sky. And then kind of beyond that, just the wonderful colors that the Beckmann creates in the water in particular, the yellows, the reds, the golds here. And then the figures who, as you start to look more closely at the painting, start to emerge. So for example, here you can see a figure of a drowning man whose head, kind of rather ghostly head, just appears out of the water. The painting has a kind of power to it which I think is in many ways largely due to Beckmann's composition. He chose to actually set his horizon very high up, almost right at the top of the painting. And because of that, one has almost a sensation that the boats are tumbling out of the composition. It really adds to the kind of disorienting, kind of nightmarish quality that I think he was aiming for in this composition. His work, particularly in the 1920s, is a kind of social commentary. It deals with the atmosphere in Germany, particularly after World War I, the sense of depression, of desolation during that period. Max Beckmann's Christ and the Woman Taken in Adultery was painted in 1917. It's a painting which really speaks to human cruelty, human barbarism, the kind of subjects that Beckmann had experienced in World War I and which have deeply affected him. So what you see in this painting here is that a woman is being stoned by a mob. And then in the center of the composition, you have the figure of Christ, who's protecting the woman. Interestingly, the face of Christ is actually modeled on that of Beckmann himself. One of the interesting things in Beckmann's work is to try to spot Beckmann in his other paintings, because he's often kind of hiding himself within more religious or mythological scenes. He'll represent himself as a king or as Christ indeed. So he's a man a little bit like Picasso, who had this very strong ego, but in a way that is what makes him a great artist. It's what separates him from other figures. And it's interesting to see that there have been a lot of exhibitions recently of Beckmann's work, and people are, which would never have been the case 10 years ago, that people are starting to talk about Beckmann in the same kind of breath as a Picasso or a Matisse. He was extremely popular in the 1920s. He had a very secure patron base. What you see in the 1930s as the Nazis come to power is that starts to disappear. His work is declared degenerate. He's declared a cultural Bolshevik. And by 1937, Beckmann is leaving Germany. He's going into exile. His work is in the Degenerate Art Exhibition in Germany in 1937. But he spends the years from 1937 to 47 in Amsterdam. So this is Acrobats. This is the third of Beckmann's 9 completed triptychs, painted in 1939. Beckmann was always fascinated by the circus, and what you see here are a group of circus performers. You've got 3 different areas within the circus. To the left here is the circus arena. So you can see figures on a tightrope here. You can see a trapeze artist at the top. In the center, you have a kind of behind-the-scenes view. This is a dressing room with a number of performers who are getting ready to perform. For example, you have a snake charmer here on the right. And then in the right-hand triptych, you have the entrance foyer to the circus. You can see the ice cream seller on the left. These are a couple of clowns here who are drinking champagne. And then the figure at the top right is a performer dressed as Mars, the Roman god of war. And this, for Beckmann, was a reference to the wider historical context, the fact that this painting was painted around the onset of World War II. I like to imagine that Beckmann loved the circus, and he saw it as a kind of sanctuary, a place of retreat, of liberation, and that idea was particularly resonant at this moment when he was surrounded by horror, with the onset of World War II, but he still found a kind of sense of sanctuary in the circus. Beckmann, for me, is a great colorist, and that color becomes more and more evident in his late work. So you see these paintings which, where the figures are framed by these wonderful dark black lines, almost like stained glass, and within those lines you have these incandescent colors, canary yellows, wonderful turquoises, bright scarlet reds. And that is part of the appeal of Beckmann, just on a purely visceral level. And this painting has a particularly poignant aspect to it for me. It was shown at the Metropolitan Museum in New York in 1950. Beckmann was in New York at that time, went to see the painting. It was while he was actually crossing Central Park that he had a heart attack and died. You can trace a kind of dark vision and a fairly pessimistic view of the world in a lot of these works. Having said that, even though he never subscribed to a particular religion, there is a kind of what you might call a sort of spiritual underpinning to his work. He talked about trying to render the invisible visible in his paintings. So, that interest in the spiritual, I think, lends a slightly more optimistic element to his work, which does counterbalance the pessimism that you can see in his view of society. As we've reconceptualized, rethought the collection and reinstalled it in what we've called the new view, we decided to make Max Beckmann really front and center. So we wanted to celebrate that and foreground it in a way which we haven't done before.
For more information, visit slam.org. Finally, we drop by Boston, Massachusetts and meet the team behind the latest theatrical adaptation of The Jungle Book. Tony Award-winning director Mary Zimmerman sits down with reporter Jared Bowen to share her inspiration for the production, including a recent trip to India.
From the wilds of Rudyard Kipling's India to a classic Disney film, The Jungle Book's latest chapter is a new musical.
I wanna walk like you, talk like you.
Based on Kipling's own childhood in India, The Jungle Book follows the young orphan Mowgli coming of age under the tutelage of his animal friends and mentors. But, says Mary Zimmerman, the musical's Tony-winning director, we are all written into The Jungle Book.
You know, it really is leaving the jungle that all of us have to go through, leaving the wonderment of childhood into the world of adult power.
Commissioned to create the musical adaptation several years ago, Zimmerman says she was immediately mindful of Kipling's own harrowing story, when at the age of 8, he was left by his parents in a brutal British boarding school.
It was a really terrible place, and Kipling and his sister were very profoundly physically abused and possibly sexually abused. And for Kipling to write about this as a Victorian more than once in his fiction and in his autobiography, you know that he considered it a very serious and life-changing or shaping element of his life.
In his later stories, Zimmerman says Kipling yearned for the India in which he was first raised, the India where she also took her creative team to begin adapting the piece.
We're just gathering impressions and feelings, and literally the way the light is hitting through a certain window or the way a bird flew up. It's just sort of endless.
One of the biggest hooks, though, was the Indian music, which music director Doug Peck infused with the film's jazz score for a rousing mashup.
Indian music doesn't use harmony in any sort of Western sense. However, what they do use is tremendous melodic and rhythmic complexity, and always a goal that the music making is very vocal, is very soulful.
This project was the hardest project I've ever done.
All of the show's creators are mindful of the weight of toying with a story, imagery, and music known to millions thanks to the movie. But Zimmerman says she both visually and musically quotes the film. She and Peck also had the added benefit of access to Richard Sherman, who along with his brother Robert wrote most of the original music, including songs that didn't make it into the film.
He doesn't dictate every little element of what the arrangement, what the rhythm, what the harmony will be. He writes a song that he expects you to explode and take off on a journey with.
He has genius advice on arrangement, and he has such showbiz acumen, and if it's of a certain period, but there's great charm. He's so complimentary all the time, like a great father or uncle who's like, oh, you kids, it's just terrific. It's just terrific what you've done. It's just, oh my goodness, it's so good. You know, and he just pours that on us.
Proving that, not unlike Kipling, you can go home again.
For more arts and culture, visit azpbs.org/artbeat, where you'll find feature videos and information on the Arizona art scene. Funding for Artbeat Nation is made possible by contributions to 8 from viewers like you. Thank you.